The heavens are not closed. Your frequency is simply crowded by the noise of a dying world. We live in an era where the airwaves are thick with the static of political upheaval, digital distraction, and the relentless hum of social media. It is easy to look at the world around us and feel as though the voice of God has grown distant, or perhaps that the grand era of revelation ended when the pioneers finally settled the Salt Lake Valley. But if we believe in the restoration, we must believe that the heavens are just as open today as they were in that sun-drenched grove in 1820. The problem isn't that the great architect has stopped speaking, it's that we have lost the keys to the radio room. Joseph Smith didn't just restore a list of commandments or a weekly meeting schedule. He restored a direct, vibrating line to the Creator, a technology of the soul that was meant to be used daily, not just cited in Sunday school lessons once every 4 years. There is a profound tragedy unfolding in the lives of many modern saints. We walk through a world that is increasingly dark, stumbling over obstacles that were never meant to trip us up, all because we have left the most powerful tools of our dispensation sitting unused on the shelf. These aren't just metaphorical keys. They are spiritual laws that Joseph Smith practiced with a frequency that would shock most of us today. When the prophet first began his work, the room didn't just go silent because he was a charismatic leader. It went silent because the veil was being pulled back by a man who understood how to tune his spirit to the frequency of the infinite. If we find our lives lacking that same prophetic clarity, we must ask ourselves if we are actually following the mechanics of revelation that Joseph lived by, or if we are merely coasting on the momentum of a faith we don't fully understand. The noise of our age is unique. Never before in human history has the adversary had the ability to reach into our pockets and demand our attention every 30 seconds. This digital noise is a direct attack on the very mechanism of revelation. To understand how to fix this, we have to look back at the archives of the Church not as a history book, but as a technical manual for spiritual survival. There is a detail in section 121 of the Doctrine and Covenants that changes everything when you realize it wasn't just written as a comfort to a suffering man in Liberty Jail, but as a scathing critique of why the power of heaven is often withdrawn from us. It tells us that the rights of the priesthood are inseparably connected with the powers of heaven, but that those powers cannot be controlled or handled except upon the principles of righteousness. We often think of righteousness as just being good, but in the context of revelation, it means being in right standing or in alignment with the laws of light. To navigate the modern darkness, we need to rediscover 3 specific keys that Joseph Smith used to unmute the spirit. These aren't secrets in the sense that they are hidden in a locked vault in the mountains of Utah. They are secrets because they are so simple and so demanding that we have largely ignored them in favor of a more convenient, surface-level spirituality. We are going to dive deep into the mechanics of spiritual hearing. We're going to look at the historical journals, the early revelations, and the specific patterns of the restoration to show you how to turn that silent line into a roaring flood of light. Because the truth is, the world is not going to get quieter. The political distractions are not going to fade. The only way forward is to develop a hearing that can pierce through the static. When Joseph Smith walked into the woods near his home in New York, he wasn't just looking for a feeling of peace. He was looking for an answer to a specific, localized, and urgent problem. The burned-over district of his youth was a cacophony of religious noise, much like our modern digital landscape. Every sect was shouting, "Lo, here," and "Lo, there." And in the midst of that war of words and tumult of opinions, Joseph realized something fundamental. Reading about revelation wasn't the same thing as receiving it. As he reflected on James 1 verse 5, he realized that if he lacked wisdom, he had to ask God directly. But notice the phrasing, "If any of you lack wisdom." It doesn't say, "If any of you lack information." We are drowning in information, but we are starving for the wisdom that only comes through a direct connection to the source of all intelligence. The first key we must reclaim is what I call the law of spiritual frequency. In Doctrine and Covenants section 88, the Lord speaks about a light which proceedeth forth from the presence of God to fill the immensity of space. He describes it as the law by which all things are governed. In our modern world, we think of light as something we see with our eyes, but Joseph understood light as a form of intelligence that actually vibrates through the universe. When we are out of tune, it means our personal vibration, our thoughts, our desires, our daily environment, is mismatched with that divine frequency. If you try to pick up an FM radio signal on an AM receiver, you get nothing but static. The signal is there, but the hardware is set to the wrong mode. We often wonder why we don't receive daily revelation for our lives. We feel that God is being silent. But according to section 88, the light is already filling the immensity of space. It is hitting you right now. The reason you aren't hearing it is that your frequency is crowded by the dying world the hook mentioned. Think about your average morning. Most of us wake up and immediately check our phones. We flood our brains with news, emails, social media outrage, and the opinions of people who don't even know us. Before we have even taken a breath, we have tuned our receiver to the frequency of the world. We have invited the static in. By the time we get around to a 2-minute prayer, our hardware is so overheated with digital noise that we couldn't hear a still small voice if it were shouting in our ears. The prophet Joseph Smith knew that to receive the mysteries of godliness, he had to create a space of resonance. He didn't just pray in the middle of a crowd. He sought out the silence of the woods, the seclusion of an upper room, or the quiet of a jail cell. He understood that revelation requires a quieting of the waters. If you throw a stone into a choppy, wind-blown lake, you see no ripples. But if you throw that same stone into a glass-still pond, the ripples reach the farthest shore. Our lives are currently that wind-blown lake. The first key to unlocking daily revelation is the intentional, radical pruning of noise. It is the realization that your attention is your most sacred commodity. If the adversary can't make you bad, he will simply make you busy and loud. He will fill your frequency with so much triviality that there is no room for the intelligence of God to land. This is why President Nelson has repeatedly emphasized the need to hear him. It wasn't just a catchy slogan for a bicentennial celebration. It was a desperate plea for a people who are losing their ability to discern. To unmute the spirit, you have to be willing to unplug from the world. This doesn't mean moving to a cabin in the mountains, but it does mean creating sacred groves in your daily schedule, moments of total digital silence where you are not consuming anything, but are instead making yourself available to receive. If you are constantly inputting information from the world, you have no output for the spirit to work with. The law of frequency dictates that light cleaveth unto light and intelligence cleaveth unto intelligence. If your mind is filled with the dark, jagged static of political bickering or endless entertainment, the light of revelation has nothing to cleave to. We often think of revelation as a lightning bolt, a sudden, unexpected event. But for Joseph Smith, it was more often a flow. He spoke of the spirit of revelation as something that would flow into you and give you sudden strokes of ideas. But flows require a channel. If the channel is blocked with the debris of 1,000 YouTube videos and Twitter threads, the flow stops. This brings us to a second realization about the frequency. Revelation is rarely an interruption of your day. It is the undercurrent of it. If you have ever used a noise-canceling pair of headphones, you know they work by emitting a frequency that cancels out the external noise. The first key to daily revelation is developing a spiritual noise cancellation by grounding yourself in the scriptures and in silence before the world has a chance to speak to you. The second key to unlocking daily revelation is what we might call the protocol of inquiry. If you look at the history of the church, you will notice a fascinating pattern in how the revelations in the Doctrine and Covenants were received. Joseph almost never sat down and said, "Okay, God, tell me something interesting." Almost every single section, from the profound doctrines of section 76 to the practical advice of section 9, was the result of a specific, pointed question. In the early days of the church, Joseph was constantly asking. He asked about the meaning of specific verses in the New Testament while he was translating. He asked about the location of the New Jerusalem. He asked why some people were being healed and others weren't. We often fail to receive daily revelation because we are too vague in our asking. We pray for blessings, or we ask God to guide us through the day, which are wonderful sentiments, but they don't provide the hook for revelation to hang on to. Revelation is a response to an inquiry. Think about the experience of Oliver Cowdery in section 9. He wanted to translate, but he failed. The Lord told him why. Behold, you have not understood. You have supposed that I would give it unto you, when you took no thought save it was to ask me. This is a stinging rebuke that applies to most of us. We suppose God will just dump revelation into our laps without us doing the mental and spiritual heavy lifting of formulating a specific inquiry. The protocol of inquiry requires that we study it out in our minds first. Joseph Smith's journals reveal a man who was constantly wrestling with ideas. He would read, he would discuss, he would ponder, and only when he had pushed his own understanding to its limit would he take the matter to the Lord. There is a spiritual law at play here. The Lord will not do for us what we can do for ourselves. If you are asking for guidance on a decision but haven't actually researched the options, weighed the consequences, or consulted the existing light, scriptures, and prophetic counsel, the heavens will likely remain silent. Why? Because you haven't yet created the mental framework to receive the answer. In the early days of the Restoration, the room often went silent when Joseph spoke because he was revealing things that people hadn't even thought to ask about. But he had. He was probing the boundaries of heaven. If you want prophetic clarity to navigate modern darkness, you have to stop asking safe questions. You have to start asking about the unused keys of your own life. Ask the Lord, what is the one thing in my life that is preventing me from feeling the Spirit more strongly? Ask, how can I better serve this specific person in my ward who seems to be struggling? Ask for the meaning of a specific verse that has always confused you. When you move from vague generalities to specific inquiries, you will find that the heavens move from general silence to specific instructions. There is a myth in the church that revelation is only for big things, mission calls, marriages, or major career moves. But Joseph Smith's life teaches us that the Spirit is interested in the small things too. He received revelations about where to build a house, how to manage the church's printing press, and even how to deal with specific individuals who were causing trouble. The protocol of inquiry means bringing your entire life into the conversation. If you are struggling with a political distraction, don't just complain about it. Ask the Lord for a perspective that transcends the binary conflicts of the world. Ask for a watchman's view. When you do this, you are exercising the key of inquiry, and you will find that the vibrating line starts to hum with activity. Consider the prophet's work on the inspired version of the Bible. He didn't just sit there and have the words dictated to him. He was reading the King James Version, and as he read, he would encounter a verse that didn't feel right, or that seemed to contradict another truth. That friction, that mental discomfort, was the catalyst for the revelation. He would pause, inquire, and the heavens would open. If you want revelation in your life, you need to find the points of friction. Where does your life not align with the gospel? Where does your understanding fail? Those are not bad things. They are the starting points for a conversation with the Creator. But you have to be willing to sit in that discomfort and study it out, rather than just scrolling past it to the next distraction. The third key is perhaps the most difficult, and it is what I call the alchemical nature of revelation. In the old world, alchemy was the attempt to turn lead into gold. In the spiritual world, the unused key is the ability to turn physical action into spiritual reception. We often wait to feel the Spirit before we act. We wait for the burning in the bosom before we make a move. But the historical record of the Restoration shows that, more often than not, the revelation came during or after the action was taken. The Lord told the early saints to go to the Ohio, and it was only after they started moving that they received the law and the higher endowments of power in Kirtland. This is the principle of acting on already received light. Many of us are waiting for new revelation while we are currently ignoring the old revelation we've already been given. If the Lord has told you in your patriarchal blessing to do something, or if a prophet has given a specific command in general conference that you haven't yet implemented, why would the heavens open to give you more? The Spirit is not a source of entertainment. It is a guide for action. If there is no intent to act, the channel of revelation will inevitably constrict. Joseph Smith was a man of immense action. He was always building, always moving, always organizing. And it was in the doing that the knowing was perfected. In Doctrine and Covenants 93, the Lord gives us a staggering promise. And if your eye be single to my glory, your whole body shall be filled with light, and there shall be no darkness in you. and that body which is filled with light comprehendeth all things. Notice the order of operations. The single eye, the intent and action, comes first. Then the filling with light. Then the comprehending. We want the comprehending, the daily revelation and clarity, without the filling. And we want the filling without the single eye. We want to see the whole map before we take the first step. But the watchman knows that the light only shines a few feet in front of you. It is only as you move into the darkness that the light moves with you. This is why digital noise is so deadly. It creates a state of passive consumption. We sit and we watch and we think and we feel, but we do very little. Revelation, however, is active. It is vibrating. If you want to unmute the spirit, you have to find something to do with the light you already have. If you feel a small nudge to text a friend, and you don't do it, you have just told the spirit that you are an unreliable receiver. If you feel an impression to read a specific chapter of the Book of Mormon, and you put it off to watch a movie, you are damping the signal. The secret to unlocking more revelation is to be 100% obedient to the tiny revelations you are already getting. The more you act, the more the Lord trusts you with higher frequencies of intelligence. When you look at the journals of early saints like Parley P. Pratt or Wilford Woodruff, you see men who were constantly testing this principle. They would feel a stray thought and treat it as a divine command. They would walk miles out of their way because of a feeling, and they would find a person waiting for them who needed the gospel. They weren't special in the sense that they had a different biology than we do. They were simply more conductive to the Spirit because they had removed the insulation of hesitation and disobedience. They were spiritual alchemists, turning their daily physical movements into a conduit for the power of God. We often talk about the restoration of the priesthood keys, and we visualize them as actual metal keys or as abstract rights to preside. But on a personal level, these keys are functional. They are the keys to a door that stands between your current state and a state of unveiled consciousness. Joseph Smith wanted every saint to be a prophet. He famously said, "God hath not revealed anything to Joseph, but what he will make known unto the 12. And even the least saint may know all things as fast as he is able to bear them." Read that again. The least saint may know all things. The limit is not on God's willingness to speak. The limit is on our ability to bear it. And our ability to bear, it is directly tied to how much we have cleared the decks of our lives to make room for it. If you are feeling spiritual vertigo from the political and social chaos of our time, it is a sign that you are relying on your own vision rather than the unused keys. The watchman on the tower doesn't see better because he has better eyes. He sees better because he is standing in a higher place. The higher place for us is that state of frequency, inquiry, and action. When you elevate your daily life by cutting out the trivial, by asking the hard questions, and by acting on every single nudge you receive, you are climbing the tower. From that height, the darkness of the world doesn't look like a chaotic mess. It looks like a fulfillment of prophecy. It looks like a world in birth pangs, and you can see exactly where to step to avoid the pitfalls. There is an obscure detail in the history of the Kirtland Temple that illustrates this beautifully. Before the dedication, the saints were commanded to wash and anoint themselves, but they were also commanded to make their hearts right with one another. There was a physical and a social preparation that had to occur before the rushing mighty wind of the Spirit could fill the house. We often want the mighty wind in our personal lives while our houses, our minds and hearts, are cluttered with resentment, distraction, and apathy. We are trying to host a celestial guest in a room filled with worldly garbage. The key is the preparation. Daily revelation is the natural result of a prepared soul. It is not an anomaly. It is the restored default state of a Latter-day Saint. Let's talk about the dying world for a moment. Why is it dying? Because it has cut itself off from the source of life, the light of Christ. As the world moves further away from that source, the static will naturally get louder and more violent. This is the noise we are hearing in our politics and our culture. If you try to engage with that noise on its own terms, you will be sucked into the vacuum. You cannot fix the noise by adding more noise to it. You can only overcome it by tuning into a higher frequency. This is what it means to be in the world but not of the world. You are physically present in the static, but your internal receiver is tuned to the vibrating line of the Creator. The prophetic timeline of our current day is accelerating. We are being told by our leaders that in coming days, it will not be possible to survive spiritually without the guiding, directing, comforting, and constant influence of the Holy Ghost. This isn't a warning in the sense of a threat. It's a warning in the sense of a weather report. If a storm is coming, telling someone to find shelter isn't mean. It's life-saving. The shelter is the ability to hear God for yourself. If you are relying on your favorite political commentator, your favorite YouTuber, or even your favorite church history scholar to tell you what is true, you are on shaky ground. You have to have your own line. You have to use the keys. Imagine for a moment what your life would look like if you actually trusted the stray strokes of ideas that come to you. Imagine if every time you felt a nudge to pray for someone, you did it instantly. Imagine if every time you felt a prompting to put down your phone and pick up the scriptures, you obeyed without a second thought. Your life would quickly become a series of divine coincidences. You would find yourself in the right place at the right time. You would say the right thing to a struggling child or a discouraged coworker. This is the prophetic clarity we all crave. It's not about seeing the future of the world. It's about seeing the now through the eyes of God. Joseph Smith once remarked that the things of God are of deep import, and time and experience and careful and ponderous and solemn thoughts can only find them out. In our world of 30-second clips and instant gratification, we have lost the art of the ponderous and solemn thought. We have traded the deep import for the shallow update. But the keys are still there. They haven't been taken from the earth. They are sitting in the Doctrine and Covenants, they are hidden in the journals of the faithful, and they are vibrating in the very air around you. The heavens are not closed. The Father is not silent. The Savior is not distant. They are simply waiting for you to turn the dial. When you look at the early saints who were forced to flee their homes in Nauvoo, they didn't know exactly where they were going. They only knew the next step. They had a general idea, the Great Basin, but the daily revelation was what kept them alive on the trail. It told them where to find water, how to deal with sickness, and when to rest. We are currently on a spiritual exodus out of a dying culture. We don't need to see the whole trail to the Salt Lake Valley of our lives. We just need to hear the voice that says, "This is the way, walk ye in it," for the next 10 miles. And that voice is only audible when we unmute the Spirit by silencing the world. There is a detail in the account of the first vision that we often overlook. Before the light appeared, Joseph was seized by a power of actual being from the unseen world that bound his tongue. He was in total, terrifying darkness. He didn't just wait for it to pass. He exerted all his powers to call upon God. It was at the moment of his greatest exertion, at the moment he refused to be silenced by the darkness, that the pillar of light appeared. If you feel like your tongue is bound spiritually, if you feel like the darkness of the world is pressing in on you, do not give up. Exert your powers. Use the keys of frequency, inquiry, and action. The light is above the brightness of the sun, and it is waiting to descend upon you. The unused keys are not complex, but they are transformative. To unmute the Spirit, you must first acknowledge that the noise is a choice. You can choose to be a consumer of the world's static, or you can choose to be a conductor of heaven's light. Second, you must move from passive prayer to active inquiry, asking the specific, ponderous questions that demand a divine response. And third, you must become an alchemist of the Spirit, acting on every spark of light you receive until your whole body is filled with light. This is the path the prophet Joseph Smith walked, and it is the only path that leads through the modern darkness to the dawn of the second coming. As we close this exploration, I want to challenge you to do something radically different tonight. Before you go to bed, instead of checking your phone one last time, put it in another room. Sit in the silence for 10 minutes. Don't pray in the traditional sense. Just listen to the static in your own mind. Notice how loud it is. Then, ask the Lord one specific question about a problem you are facing. Study it out in your mind for a few minutes, proposing a solution. Then listen. Don't expect a lightning bolt. Just look for a sudden stroke of an idea. And when it comes, Even if it's as small as go talk to your spouse or read section 42. Act on it tomorrow morning with the same urgency as if an angel had told you. The restoration is not a historical event. It is a current reality. The vibrating line is open. The keys are in your hands. The only question is whether you will let them stay unused on the shelf, or whether you will use them to unlock the floodgates of light that this world so desperately needs. We often talk about the signs of the times, and we look for wars and rumors of wars. But the greatest sign of the times is a people who can hear him in the midst of the noise. Be that person. Be the watchman in your own home. The heavens are waiting for your call.